All right, good evening, everyone. This is Caleb Longrear, meeting you with vetsrei.com and recording a session of the veterans class, something we try to hold every Thursday at 6 to 7 p.m. with networking afterwards over at the Short North Brewing Company, or North High Brewing Company, next door to the Armory at Cohatch in Westerville in the central Ohio, Columbus area. Really cool spot. Great place to talk about veterans resources and real estate opportunities that can be available to veterans who want to utilize their VA loans and ancillary opportunities associated with that. So buckle up for a semi-riveting evening talking about how veterans can use resources such as the VA loan for opportunities to invest in real estate. Okay, so number one, let's talk about, do another rehash of opportunities, and sorry, I apologize about this. Let me get this out of here. Let's see here. Sorry, we're rebranding over here, and what am I looking for? Why would you do that? And let's see here. All right, keyboard's navigation's acting a little weird. So in our last episode, took us an hour to work through a spreadsheet that provided an explanation of how a 4-unit apartment building called a fourplex could turn out to be possibly as much as $7.3 million in 30 years. So if you utilized a fourplex VA loan, zero money down, $800,000 property, lived in one of those units of 4 for the first year, and then you could have moved out, but in that scenario, we evaluated that you did move out after a year, satisfying the residence requirement for the VA on that loan, and then you rented out the 4th unit as well at a 9% over mortgage cost. And there's a couple things that we're missing. One, I probably over calculated the earnings that could be invested in a stock index after you cleared your mortgage payment each month. So it's probable that we're looking closer to 5.3 million versus 7.3. So just a cool 2 million. But the point of the dialogue is to ensure that you and I, as veterans, and anyone eligible for it, are able to utilize or aware of the fact that you can get up to a fourplex in a VA loan. And if you do utilize that in more than a single unit, a single family home, that can turn into an investment property with some pretty equal returns of what you would typically expect for a real estate property. And it is my theory that this is the most valuable, potentially, resource for veterans in the United States military, outside of things like free health care, where, I met a retired veteran, 4-year Navy, 16 years at least in the Navy Reserves, I believe. And then was a retired railroad worker, and met him in a Bob Evans, having dinner one night with our family, my wife and I, and our 3 children at the time. And this gentleman was across the street from a hospital in downtown Columbus area, or Short North area, and he was looking to go the next day to get a surgery to remove some cancer or treat cancer in his 70s, probably, for $660,000 surgery. And his max out of pocket was $1,000 for that year for his medical insurance through TRICARE for Life, I believe is the the title. So, outside of incidences like that, where a $660,000 operation is going to be covered for $1,000 per year and whatever else comes out of that, straightforward upfront money in general, the VA loan as an investment tool provides the largest investment return, because in that scenario, that's a huge $660,000 bill that gets covered by your VA medical TRICARE treatment. And what you can see here on the screen is some rough hand spreadsheets that will cover return potentially with Caleb's numbers up to let's say $5.3 million, because I think I double invested some of this money in my calculation. So very important stuff for veterans to be aware of, especially young ones, especially middle-aged ones, especially older ones, senior citizens, especially people with families that have something and want something to pass on to their descendants, their loved ones, their wife, their children, their grandchildren. One single usage of this with a 30-year time span of the property being paid off on a conventional 30-year loan could turn out to mean $5.3 million in a typical, $800,000 property to start with, which is lucrative or valuable, high value, and but relative to your area where your real estate's going to end up, and on average, you can expect about a 3% annual increase in property value as a standard, with about a 3% increase in rent. So yeah. So let's talk about how many people have used this. So today there are 17 to 19 million veterans that live in the United States, having served in the military of the United States. And it is speculated that 13 to 17% of veterans have utilized the VA loan since the inception of the program, which was in 1944. Congress passed an act that helped to reestablish returning veterans from World War II, and to help them get on their feet, they passed the VA loan program as part of that act. And so that's where zero money down for a mortgage on a residential property was backed by the VA Department, Veterans Affairs Department. And then when you would typically pay for primary mortgage insurance, which can be a couple $100s a month as well, while you're not at 20% of the equity being owned and paid off by you, that might be an extra couple $100. So you skip having to save up 20% of the house value for a down payment, and you also don't have to pay the primary mortgage insurance, which is required when you don't own 20% of the home. So you can skip. Let's say it's a $400,000 house. That would be $80,000 you don't have to save up as a service member, a veteran, for the down payment of 20%. And you also then get to skip a couple $100, $220 of primary mortgage insurance on top of your home insurance, etc. So if you're in the scenario where you're going to probably continue to rent otherwise, where the same property you're looking to live in is going to cost a little bit more per month than the mortgage, because someone's going to need to be making money on owning that property and renting it to you. You either would live in a generally worse house, it's going to be equivalent or less of value than being on the mortgage yourself. You don't, that money goes to the person that owns the property. You do not pay off the property yourself, so you're not accruing equity in that property down the road, and if you're in a scenario to be paying rent, maybe your finances are such that you can start saving up your down payment, which is a fiscally responsible thing to do. But if it's going to be a challenge to make it to $80,000 down payment for a conventional 20% down, and there are options for 3 and 5 and probably 10, but traditional mortgage approach, how long will it take you to save up $80,000 to get into a house, right? That might be that might be 5 years, 8 years down the road for you. So if you're a service member who has served, using the VA loan, not requiring a more down payment is might save you 5 to 6 years of rent, and rather than rent going into someone else's pocket, you're building a couple $100 worth of equity just by making your mortgage payment every single month, which it's not amazing, but it's better. It's not as bad as not developing any value and equity in your home. So that's on a single family home. If you can utilize that for a duplex, a triplex, a 3-unit, or a 4-unit, a quadplex, then you are looking at some real returns in a retirement package that you could utilize down the road through cash flowing rent and accruing value as your property appreciates, and having an asset that you can give to your children and or sell at the end of your life. If it's time to relocate, go downsize, you got options there. So let's see if we can walk back through this real quick. It took us about an hour to get there. So in this proposition, we utilized an $800,000 property. And, maybe we should do one where it's about half this, but, you can get in the fourplexes around $400,000. I know of one that's for sale right now for $250,000. It's in a fixed, repair needed status, but I should probably figure out the average nationwide for fourplexes and the average for apartment unit and work off of that. So this is basically twice the national average in my estimation of what a fourplex would be, but it's also theoretically in a good area that will also bring in more of a higher premium on rent. So this is year 1 you've got up here down to year 30. Okay. And then your monthly payment on a mortgage, roughly speaking, let's say that's $5,481. And that's per year, $65,778. Let's say your rent, and we calculated rent based off of, I believe, 0.9% over your mortgage payment. So let's say you're collecting rent at 9% over what it's costing you per year. And I think others could argue it should be 15%. So if we calculated 15% over your mortgage versus 9, it'd be a very significant, so your earning income for rent collection could almost double there and go up 60-70%. And per year, you're bringing in $75,600. Now, what we haven't calculated is, let's say you put a couple percent or 5% aside to some degree every year for maintenance. And there's some kind of a standard there that people advise that would need to be built in. There's numbers that we could crunch here that need to be more accurately assessed. But generally, if your prices go up, you do your best to also just pass that on to the user, the customer, so that you're covered in that sense. So yes, we're missing some costs. We're also not over baking the profits into this, and hopefully we'll refine that moving forward. So here you go, $5,481 a month, $66,000 a year, $6,300 a month coming in, $75,600 coming in a year. So you got about a net profit of $10,000 the first year, but you notice here your mortgage payment doesn't change by year 30 annually. Your monthly cost of the mortgage and primary interest and principal. Your property taxes are probably going to go up, but let's just keep this here in general. And then, so your annual expense of the mortgage payment stays at $65,000 generally, by and large. Your income on a 3% increase turns out to be $178,000 on that rent. So if this is based off of a 3% per year of increase in rent prices. So by the end of the 30 years, we can follow this real quick. What is it? Yeah, here we go. So that stays the same. By year 6, you're getting $7,300 per month over a $5,400 outflow. By year 15, you're looking at $9,500. So you're cash flowing positive income of $4,100 here. And then 26 years in, you're looking at about $8,000 surplus or $7,800. And then you've got, at the end of the day, 30 years, good to go. You're collecting $9,000 surplus. And annually, that looks like $178,000. And then down here, so what you've got here is top box right here is the value of that property after 30 years. So started at $800,000, ended up at $1,885,000. That's 3% value of appreciation per year for 30 years on that $800,000 property. That's the national average over history recently for property appreciation. So your value is you got a $1.8 million piece of property. This here is quick, rough math calculating of what you're going to spend each year to pay it off. And that turns out to be $1,973,000. So you have spent $100,000 or let's see, is that $88,000 more? Perhaps, yeah. So you've spent $88,000 more than you've brought in over a 30-year period, just in reference to your current value of your property. Okay. Now, let's talk about your rent collection. Your rent collection minus your expenses, you're trusting my formulas here, turns out to be $3.596,000. So $3,596,000. So now you're looking at, you got $3.6 million of income, and then you've got $1.9 million of expense for mortgage payment, and then you've got a $1.8 million property. So let's say we got this correctly recorded here. Sorry. Okay, so that's interesting. Yep. The formulas have gone. Okay, we're going to be able to figure this out, but we get what we're saying here. So yeah, so as we said, it's 1.9 million, and this is 3.6 million of rent collection. If you look down here in the bottom, that turns out to be $3.5 million at the end of the day, 30 years down the road, rent collected, mortgage spent, plus the value of the property on hand. So there you go. That's $3.5 million on an $800,000 fourplex, plus or minus a couple of calculations for you, a veteran who has an E5 or above, eligible for a VA loan, who's had 30 to 90 days of active duty time or 6 years of showing up to drill as a reservist. You complete your first your first enlistment of 6 years, and you'll fulfill your initial obligation or spend 30 days on active duty on some form of orders, typically a little bit different than just training orders. So you get activated in country, overseas, especially a deployment overseas on Title 10 orders. You're going to be a veteran in the eyes of the VA within 90 days at least. A lot of times 30. Clarification, 30 is good, 90 is good, 6 years of drilling, that's good. And there's a difference between active duty and reservists in general, especially with orders. So just something you need to make sense out of. But now you're eligible for a VA loan. At that point, you need to become, if you want to apply for a VA loan, then you do need to go through the process of getting your credit and finances reviewed by a mortgage lender. And then you want to use that opportunity. Well, you find out what you're eligible for through that lender, and then you can go from there. So there might be a scenario where maybe you don't qualify for a fourplex, but you really can work that system to where your potential and likely rental income can also be considered. So if your current income doesn't get you approved for a fourplex, I've seen it fought. In my case, they did not utilize the renter's income without first looking at approving my finances as a standalone. If you do get denied, there's an option to say, well, what's the rent that's coming in on that property? And let's get a copy of that lease so we can consider this as expected income, and can help offset your debt to income ratio and different other items that get evaluated. So here you have it, $3.5 million. Now, the second thing that we worked out is, what if you invested the money that you're keeping from your positive cash flow on rent collection? And I want to try to make sense of this, so bear with me here. So 65, 140. This is interesting. What did I do? Okay. So B7 minus B5. Oh, duh. Okay. Yeah, let's do this. All right. When I changed that, that made an issue. Okay. So yeah, I think we are currently reflecting what was intended originally. And that is that your first year, you're going to collect a positive cash flow of $10,000. So imagine, okay, so there's that collection. First year, you make $10,000. Second year, it's $12,000 based off of, this is where, so you take your $9,800 and you invest 65% of it into index fund, that, Dow Jones Industrial Average mutual fund, or 1,000, where of valuable companies, 1,000 parts of the money you're investing is split 1,000 ways, and you just ride the average of those 1,000 successful, most likely to succeed companies with their profit earnings averaged out. It's a reliable investment that historically gets you 7 to 10% since World War II in a U.S.-based stock exchange. So that's like the baseline. You could just stick your money in there, get 7 to 10%. So any other type of investment, what would you want to do? What else would you want to do? You can go get more money. We're talking about 3% valuation increase on real estate properties, but there's tax advantages, there's appreciation, there's cash flow as well, rental income. So things that go into that evaluation. And $6,300 is 65% of $9,800. And let's say you spend 35% of your profits that year, go out and have a couple of dine out a couple times, take a road trip for a weekend, come back, you keep 65% of it, you invest it into an index fund. That goes into the following year where you get your, what I got over here? So B13 times 0.8. And so what this is here, 0.108, is that if you get 8% annual increase, so let's take a low high of 8% as a range from 7 to 10, and you here, love this. Okay, so this is adding your C7 and C5. Yeah, sorry guys. C7 and C5, C6 times 12. Yep, okay. So C7 plus C5. Okay. So, yeah, this is, sorry, confused myself with what I got going on here. So C6 times 12. Okay, yeah, thanks again. Yeah, so I think this has got to be. So I'm having a hard time tracking down how I made this formula, but I know what I'm trying to do with it, and it looks like it's working right. This $12,000 is your $6,300. Yeah, I could be very wrong here, and that could very much affect the return rate of returns. So this is just this year you got that much money in profit, and then this should be how much you have being invested of it. Okay, that should be taken into consideration the money from each year with compounding interest that's getting put into the stock exchange at 65% of your profit at an 8% interest, plus the follow-on year. So that accrues 8% interest. And then in addition to that, you add that additional 65% of profits of that following year's rent, which goes up 3% every year. And then as you continue to invest that in an 8% earning interest investment, that compounds back to you. And you go from there. So calculated appropriately, which I'm starting to wonder to what degree I actually do have that calculated properly. I think, yeah, that's what we've got going over here. So I don't know if I just need to ignore those lower two rows over there. So interesting. Yeah. Okay. So I think what I've got going on over here is what I just described. And then over here, that turns out to be, and I think this is where it's a little bit wrong. Let's say $2.8 million is what you end up with when you start with year one, 68, 63, 83, where you're, yeah. So 65% of your profit on year one, that's brought over here. And I think I just rough copied it without the formulas once I got it figured out, or maybe no, this is where the formulas kick in. So that's what it's doing. 63%, $6,300, your 65% profit on year one gets invested right here. So A5 times 8%. So 8% from your prior year's investment with year number two's profits, which is instead of 6,300, you made 7,500. So this is your cash flow. You spend 35% of it. That leaves $7,800, and you invest that into this right here, the stock market. And so that turns out now you have $14,000. And so that's calculated correctly. That turns out to be 2.8 million. And this is where I got it wrong the other day when I did this calculation. I'm not accounting appropriately 35% of this rent collection money up here. And so whatever we would need to reduce from this 3.5 million, because ultimately it turns out to be better for you because you've invested some of this, you've invested 65% of this rent collection over time. And you've invested it in an 8% accruing interest fund. So rather than just $3.5 million in the bank, you also have it accruing interest in the bank. And in the stock market. So really roughly, with messing with some compound interest inappropriately, inaccurately, your 3.596 $3.6 million, you turn it into 2.3 million. I guess you would want to reduce this if you're going to. This is what you would want to do. So at the end of the day, you spent $1.8 million. You discretionary expended it. You used it as income. You enjoyed it over the history of your life in general, or you just left it in a savings account, but you didn't invest it heavily. But let's say it's discretionary income. At the end of the day, you're looking at about $1.8 million that cash on hand, go to the mall kind of thing, pay for the car. And then 65% of those profits get invested over here, and that still turns into 2.8 million. So you spent 1.7 of your 3.5 originally. You spent 1.97 thousand, and this turns out to be let's see here. Okay. That turns out to be a total of 4.6 million. That's really interesting. That I don't think that could be correct, but yeah, you end up with at least an extra $900,000, but I'd be surprised if that's all you'll end up with. But given that most people's retirements are around $400,000 to $500,000 at the end of the day, $900,000 extra dollars in your index fund with a $1.8 million property, with $1.8 million of discretionary income over 30 years. What's that average out to at the end of the day? That's averaged out over year, that's an extra $60,000 of discretionary income for you, like that you could just spend as income if you don't mind. And then you would have $2.8 million in index fund. So instead of $500,000, a generally successful retirement fund, you've got 6 times that amount. And then you've got a $1.8 million property that's paid off for $1.9 million. So you've still got a $1.8 million property that over time you've spent $1.9 million, not accounting for upkeep. But we also have some very conservative estimates on the value. Only 3% in appreciation, only 3% in rent increase over the years. But I'm saying that because we're in the Columbus market, which is pretty dynamic, but we need to go off of national averages. So there you go. And if you have management fees and all that, you simply would do your best to try to raise rate as much as possible to keep up with costs and utilize expenses. And there's only 9% profit in the rent collection here, wherein I've read articles where the average is attempted to be about 15%. So, if we wanted to take the time and we could calculate rent at 15% over cost, then that would be a bit of a changer to our calculus. So that's that. So let's talk a little bit about vetsrei.com. Vetsrei.com. It's been my understanding and recognition that our service members have been underserved by not having multiple investment properties sourced for them and presented to them for acquisition of investment properties. So, given that 13 to 17% of veterans have utilized the VA loan since 1944, and that I guarantee that 75% of those who have used it at least have not used it for anything more than a single family home, meaning typically not in any sense an investment property outside of your home, which that is an investment, of course. The opportunity for property investing has not been utilized to an extensive degree. And 13 to 17% of the veterans since 1944 have utilized it at all. So there are 14.1 million veterans today out of the 17 to 19 million that are alive that have seemingly never used the VA loan at all, even for a single family home. And I think a thing that's needed is for us to identify and bring awareness to veterans what opportunities are available with investing properties and how they could take advantage of those and get them into their portfolio to where they're able to help retire off of it down the road when they're entering in a retirement phase. So that's what Vets REI is about. And I would like for us to be engaged with educating and assisting, identifying properties that are available for veterans to acquire through a VA loan, and educating and assisting in that regards. What I would like to ask of supporters is $3 per month at this time for support, and just to kind of help us generate cash flow to build out some software systems, a little bit of salary for the people that are helping to work with this, myself, anyone else that we're going to bring on, and just generate some cash flow that we can also possibly, of course, you can't just go buy properties with $3 a month, minus 70,000 people helping out, which, theoretically we could get somewhere with that. But it just, crowdsourcing some small amounts of cash, if everyone's interested, would be helpful for starting to justify some things that, let's say, automates the delivery of lists of properties that qualify for these criteria that are likely going to pass a VA loan and are multi-units. And that information can get distributed. You can access it, get it delivered to your inbox, and have it tailored, but potentially to your area. And then with steps available that you could follow yourself, and you could follow along opportunities to track those properties down and get applied for them and get approved for them. So education and assistance is the idea with Vets REI. And if you're a veteran or a veteran supporter and or a real estate professional, the request is please consider donating and subscribing for $3 a month here, and get enough of that going on. I can dedicate some more time to it and help. I've seen quite a few veterans that I am friends with that are interested in this program, and of course, when you get into buying properties, you've got lending fees, realtor fees, titling fees, and then potentially, prior to acquiring on a VA loan, rehabbing, things like that. So, but for right now, we are an educational platform that educates and assists. So there is material help, but that's just something we need to figure out. But if we can provide information of properties that are available at this time, that gives you what you need to be able to move forward and just look at who's listing that property, find a realtor to work with. And we've got a lot of great opportunities. We're building a really good network. A little premature to speak of some of the great people that we've been running into that provide plenty of great resources and services to our community members in the veteran community. And looking forward to building out our cooperation and networking with them. And their presence will be here moving forward. So let me know what you guys need and have any thoughts on, any ideas on what to talk about next, and any questions that you have, things that you like, things that you have questions about now that we've raised these pointers. So thanks. I hope you guys are well. God bless. Subscribe sign up for our newsletters, and send us your feedback and any ideas on how to potentially work together and expand this awareness and information out there, so that our veterans can start taking advantage of it in the way that they would want to. So thanks. Have a great day. See you guys.